Oh boy, Matt, the people asked for it, and what the people want, the people get. And hey, we're doing a Bellator preview tonight, getting ready for Bellator 253 that's coming up live tomorrow. Now, it's an early start. It starts at about 3:45 Eastern, which these Bellator Thursday night cards will do. But hey, I'm really looking forward to it. We get the chance to do this show a day before. We get to talk about the card. Matt happened to be on the media call. And all of this wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, Ringside Beer. Make sure you check them out, ringsidebeerstore.com. Matt, that would have hurt a lot.
That would have.
These tap handles are really hot and heavy, and you can get yourself a couple of them over at ringsidebeerstore.com. Use promo code FNP, and for Fight Night Picks viewers only, you're going to save 25% off your order today. And Matt, without further ado, let's get into it. Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Vertiball. Head on over to their website. It's vertiball.com. And listen, it's an awesome product. It's a local company out of New Brunswick, Canada. So make sure you support those guys locally as well as Fight Night Picks. But they're the only mountable portable muscle massager. They can stick onto any smooth surface. They've got an industrial strength suction cup. Can support over 100 pounds of pressure. You can get really into those deep knots. I have one here at home. I use it for my back and my shoulders from holding up that Fight Night Picks Pick'em trophy. But listen, make sure you check them out. It's a great product. Like I said, they're recommended by physiotherapists, masseuses, and chiropractors across Canada, the US, UK, and Australia. And they're used by countless professional athletes like Minka Fitzpatrick on screen there, as well as Clelin Ferrell of the Raiders. So if you head into the cart, make sure you check them out. So I've got a Vertiball massager in my cart right there. Use the promo code FNP. You're going to save 10% off your order. You're supporting this company here that I'm very passionate about in New Brunswick, Canada, and you're helping out us as well. So make sure you check them out, vertiball.com, promo code FNP, 10% off your order. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. It's time for Fight Night Picks with your host, Craig and Matt Allen.
Oh boy, and Matt, we are back, and I don't know why our lighting isn't that great because we have a normal lights, and if I step out of the frame, it gets good, and then it gets bad again, which is weird. Doesn't normally happen, but hey, it's a Wednesday night.
It is.
We got fights on a Thursday night, and I'm really looking forward to Bellator 253. And I have to say, Matt, we got a lot of big things coming. Gas apparently might know something that's behind the scenes. I'm not going to comment too far on that. But we do have a presenting sponsor coming up in the next couple of weeks that I'm really looking forward to. And apparently Gas, again, half the battle guys have Manscaped sponsors, LOL, but yikes. Anyway, no, I'm really looking forward to this, and I know a lot of people following along with the show. You probably found out on Instagram as well that we were going to be doing it. We're going to be going through all of the fights on this card, all 9 of them, and just to kind of talk about it in more depth, Matt, you were actually on your very first media call, so pat yourself on the back for that one. Pretty cool stuff, and I mean, just as an aside, like we were doing Bellator stuff fairly regularly until really COVID hit. I mean, we were getting ready for Bellator 251, the original Pedro Carvalho fight, and of course that fell out the day before the card. So overall, I'm really looking forward to this, Matt. I mean, this is a great card, and maybe you just became a UFC or an MMA fan just this year. There's so much more than just the UFC. There's Bellator, there's KSW, One Championship. There's so many cards, especially this week too. There's a Brave card coming up here in the next day or so. There's the LFAs of the world, the CSs, CFFCs. You're going to see a lot of those fighters on cards like this, so get excited about it. T. Fairbrother Taekwondo saying very nice small 9-fight card midweek, especially. And it's one of those ones that you can really get excited about because, you know, the first fight that's on the card, and I'll just pop into it just quick so you can see it. Sullivan Cauley taking on Jason Marklin. You got Cauley, who, you know, bit of a salty amateur record, but he has an amateur record, making his pro debut. Jason Marklin 0-1. Maybe we can throw a little bit of shine their way. But I mean, overall, Matt, a great main event. You have the former bantamweight king, Darrion Caldwell, taking on AJ McKee. Mercenary McKee. You know Antonio's there hanging out this week. But overall, it's a great card.
It really is. This is one of the better Bellator cards out there. And if you had watched last week's card that had not started but kind of reignited that Featherweight Grand Prix, Oh my goodness, you should be excited for this weekend because we saw Emmanuel Sanchez now going to fight Patricio Pitbull. The winner of that will, of course, move on to the finals and fight the winner of tonight's main event, being Darrion Caldwell, former champ at 135. Very much thinks that he can go back down to that weight, but I do think 145 is better for Darrion Caldwell. This is the best version of him that we're going to get. And AJ McKee, I don't want to call him the golden boy because I feel like there's sort of a negative connotation along with that, but let's call it what it is. AJ McKee is one of the more marketable guys over in Bellator. He speaks extremely well. He's a handsome young guy. He has really exciting fights. He just kind of checks all those boxes when you look for kind of a company star. And we know with Michael Chandler now leaving and going to the UFC, there is a void for that kind of face of Bellator. And I really do think that if AJ McKee can not only beat Darrion Caldwell, but then beat the winner of Emmanuel Sanchez, Patricio Pitbull, he's going to be not only a big Bellator star, he could just be a big MMA star in general.
And I mean, Devin, we have to thank you as well in the
Devin.
super chat saying appreciate the insight, guys. So Matt, as in traditional Fight Night Picks question marks fashion, we'll get into our fight of the nights. And with Bellator, they don't really have fight of the night categories, but for me and for us, we have a couple of them. Jason Jackson, Benson Henderson, your co-main event is one of those ones that you have to get excited about. And I have to pop over in the chat quick because Kyle Kelly, you have been tuning in since last Bellator stuff. And we really do appreciate you. And thanks for the shouts from Edmonton. We got Boone from, are you in Saskatoon or are you just in Saskatchewan? And Tristan's from over on the West Coast. I see you there with the Jeremy Kennedy comment as well. And that fight against Matt Bessette's really good. But Matt, talking about this co-main event, you've got the former, there we go, our lighting's a little bit better. I don't know how that happened. Kind of weird. And Dimitri saying Jason Jackson, I love this guy. Man, straight up, Jason Jackson is so much fun to watch, and it sucks. You remember that fight only a few fights ago for Jason Jackson? I know he remembers it. When he had that weird ankle injury off the kick, ended up losing the fight, and then his career just progresses from maybe this guy's like a contender series, he'll pop back up, we'll see him in the UFC. He goes the Bellator route, and holy smokes, man, this guy's lighting the world on fire. And even in the loss to Ed Ruth, fight that I know we both thought he won, like, since then, shot out of a cannon.
100%. And Ed Ruth was in the welterweight tournament. He had a lot of eyes on him. A lot of people remember him. And his fight against Neiman Gracie was very hyped up. Now, I understand he's had a few losses since then, but in the Jeremy Jackson fight, those two guys beat the brakes off each other. It was a very entertaining fight the whole entire time. Ed Ruth made a very good account of himself. But what can I say about Jason Jackson? Phenomenal striker, does show improvements every fight, and I do think the Ed Ruth fight was the first time that people thought, oh wow, like Jason Jackson, even though he lost this fight, he dropped Ed Ruth hard, he outstruck him for large portions of it. It was the first time where you saw him and you thought, okay, he's lost to kind of the next step up, but I don't think he can never get to that step. And of course, since then, beating guys like Jordan Mee and Kunimoto, like, those are the big wins that you really like to see in a guy's resume as he works his way up the ranks. It's not like he's just beating, you know, unranked guy 1 or 2. He's fighting names that do give him a lot of different looks. And I mean, against Jordan Meehan, he showed a little bit of grappling. He showed how good his striking was. Jason Jackson really is, every single fight, just showing these little tiny improvements that you think, okay, if he can only fix this or that, he can turn into like a champion-style fighter. And he is starting to make those adjustments.
And I mean, if we have a look at Jason Jackson's record in his last 5 fights, that one loss is the Ed Ruth loss. If you look at the wins, Scott Futrell, you get the triangle choke win. Emerson Souza, then he comes into Bellator, split with Ruth, beats Kichi Kunimoto, and then he has that win over Jordan Meehan. And to the point that was made by, let's see, who was it? Wyatt Kenny saying Jason Jackson made Jordan Meehan look terrible.
He did.
He didn't even let him start up. Like, normally Jordan Meehan, he's a tricky fighter. He's always right in front of you. And he was in front of Jason Jackson. Jackson didn't give him an inch and really proved to me that, listen, you can beat I'd say a really good wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in MMA in Ed Ruth. Now, Ed Ruth's become a little bit more of a striker in MMA, but you know that he has that wrestling in his back pocket. Booch for Snooch saying, what is a Bellator? That's a good question.
That is.
I like the old logo that they had when we used to watch it every now and again on satellite TV. But overall, Ryan answering the questions, Warrior in Latin, so that's good to know. But overall, yeah, it's tough. You look at this fight, and Benson Henderson for me, again, we talked about this yesterday when we were talking about this card. I hold Benson Henderson in such high regard. I wish that they had Benson Henderson on the desk for Bellator, or the UFC had him on the desk. You know how the UFC does those things with Dominic Cruz and Gilbert Melendez? Put Benson Henderson in those videos. Benson Henderson, to me, is like one of those, I wouldn't say Mount Rushmore guys, But at lightweight, he is an all-timer. He's in my top 5 for sure. I don't think that's overly controversial. I would have Khabib as our lights continue to change. I would have Khabib, Benson Henderson, Frankie Edgar. You could throw in, who else?
BJ Penn, Dos Anjos, and Anthony Pettis.
I wouldn't say Dos Anjos. But either way, I really do hold him in really high regard. And in this fight, it's tough because Benson Henderson just had that knockout loss just a few months ago against Michael Chandler where it was over so quick. He was really getting pounded into the canvas there. And now he's taking a fight on short notice at 170 pounds against such a tough fighter in Jason Jackson. Why does this become a fight of the night?
Because Benson Henderson's one half it. Now, for full transparency, when I had asked Benson Henderson only 2 questions yesterday, I sweat through my sweater. That was how big of a deal it was for me to talk to him. Because we first got into the sport when Lyoto Machida and Shogun were kind of not champs, but definitely in the top 5 and still had their names in the mix. Benson Henderson and all those WEC guys were starting to make their transition over to the UFC. And he not only just came to the UFC, he became the UFC lightweight champion, beat Frankie Edgar twice. So it's pretty impressive stuff. And to talk to a guy like that was really cool. But Benson Henderson's very open about the fact that he's only got 2 more years left in the sport, he thinks. He doesn't think he's going to be around for that much longer. And he just wants to get in as many fights as he can. Now, Jason Jackson, I don't know if that's the kind of guy you want to step in on short notice just to try to get another fight in against because he is such a dangerous striker. And when I was talking to him earlier this week, he was saying that this camp, he's really made a big improvement on his finishing ability. He does like his chances against Benson Henderson. He doesn't want to go a full 15 minutes. And I think that's interesting because Benson Henderson, I understand he got finished in his last fight, but it's a very hard game plan to go out there and expect to finish a guy like Benson Henderson. Extremely durable, never gets tired, can wrestle, can strike, do a little bit of everything. So it is really hard to solve the puzzle of Benson Henderson. But if Jason Jackson's ever going to fight him, I do think this is the best time to fight him. You have him coming off a loss not that long ago at short notice. It's above his natural weight class. So if you're Jason Jackson, this is by far the biggest win of your career if you're able to beat a guy like Benson. The Ed Ruth loss was sort of the introduction that a lot of us needed to Jason Jackson. But if he gets the win over Benson Henderson, yeah, it's not just he's a guy at 170. It's like, okay, Douglas, whenever you're ready, like, we can do Lima versus Jackson. Now, I'm not going to make that some hot take and say Jason Jackson's going to beat Douglas Lima. I don't believe that's going to happen. But I do think that he can get into that category of, you know, we're going to see a Jason Jackson, Lorenz Larkin, or MVP, like those types of names afterwards. So I'm extremely excited for this fight. I love that both guys, especially Benson, he can fight at 170, he can fight at 155. So even if he loses this, as long as he doesn't get finished, I don't feel like Benson Henderson's stock is going to drop all that much. But Jason Jackson, like, this is the best opportunity you're going to get. You just fought a guy who came over from the UFC, and Jordan Meehan, who is a little bit more well-known than just your average kind of, you know, MMA welterweight. And now you're getting what I would say one of the bigger fish in the Bellator pond, Benson Henderson. So, yeah, if he can go out there and make the most of this opportunity, Jason Jackson's going to be a name that we're going to be listening to for a long time.
So that's your fight of the night. Now, mine is Keith Lee. Keith, where you at? Taking on Raufeon Stots. And Matt, this fight is really interesting because I remember watching Keith Lee. I remember hearing about him while he's Kevin's brother. And Kevin's brother fights. And Kevin's brother's going to fight with Brave. And at the time, I was like all over Brave. I thought Brave was going to be the next big deal because you've got the Kingdom of Bahrain involved. There's going to be a lot of money. And don't get me wrong, I started the show off by saying, hey, there's a big Brave card coming up this week. And there is. So make sure you check it out. But Keith Lee was fighting on one of those Brave cards, and I knew who he was. He had a really salty record at the time. He had lost to TJ Laramie's brother Tony with TKO here in Canada and Quebec. That was his first fight in 2017. He went on to win 3 fights. Then he had a fight with 864 Fighting Championship, which is an organization that you see pop up from time to time. And then he fought with Brave. It was a one-off. And we watched that fight. I remember watching it live. And knowing who Jeremy Pacatu was, Pacatu is a great striker. You had to watch out for it. And if you watch that fight, Keith Lee tries to wrestle him a little bit. Pacatu outstrikes him. That's the issue. Well, Keith Lee comes back off of that loss and wins 4 straight. And I look at the wins. I mean, Chris Johnson at 7-9. Nothing to really shake a stick at. Leonardo Carvalho at 3-3. Not that great. But the last 2, Sean Bunch and Vinicius Zaney. To me, I went over Sean Bunch. I know he just got released by Bellator. He's one of those old school guys that they used to pump up a lot because he was such a good wrestler, such an old head. He was a really good fighter. For Keith Lee to pick up a win there and to beat Vinicius Zaney, a guy who, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me, I think he's either no longer with Bellator or released, out of contract, whatever. But still, Keith Lee's a mover and shaker. He's one of those guys that you can definitely build around. And yes, it's going to be, well, it's Kevin's younger brother. But I mean, hey, promotions still try and push Alexander Emelianenko, so they're gonna ride the Keith Lee train for as long as they can. This is an interesting fight because Keith Lee's an all-action type of guy. He's always gonna push a pace. Raufeon Stots, a lot of people know him. I see Tristan mentioning, you think Stots takes him. Dimitri likes Stots, and that's where I was gonna go with it. He has that Merab loss, and I have to do it. Come on, Merab! From Matt Serra, but the come on, Merabs, that's where it came from. It came from that fight on Dana White's Looking for a Fight. It was an early season, right? I think they still had nicked the tooth on that. And Merab gets a contract because he finished Raufeon Stots so quick. But other than that, you look at Raufeon Stots' total body of work. I know he's 14-1, but there's a lot of names on that record that really jump off of the page. And in the last couple, Shaden Lealoa, that's a decent win. But the Cass Bell one, maybe it's a bit of a mismatch. Maybe this fight is too. But Cass Bell at 5-0, I know he comes in with the bright green hair, and I wouldn't even say brash because he doesn't really say all that much. But his jiu-jitsu is so good.
Phenomenal.
And for Raufeon Stots to go in there, implement his game plan, perfect Rufus Sport type of fighter, and to submit Cass Bell, that was insane. To me, that won me over because I already know he's a good wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
I already know his striking's great. If you can submit Cass Bell, I wouldn't say elite because it's a weird thing. We're talking about Bellator. But man, Raufeon Stots is somebody that you have to watch.
And okay, yes, he has that 15-second loss to Merab Dvalishvili by spinning back fist. It's crazy. Go back and watch it. It is a insane knockout. But losing to Merab doesn't mean that much. Like, there's guys, Casey Kenny is all the hotness at bantamweight right now, and he lost to Merab earlier on this year. So for Raufeon Stots, it is interesting because he has such this credential wrestling background, but chose to go to Rufus Sport as a gym. And really, you couldn't make a better choice because Rufus Sport, what are they full of? Phenomenal strikers. And then he was saying earlier on in the week, again, on the media call, that Gerald Mearshardt's really helped him out a lot with his jiu-jitsu. The two of them were working together a lot, especially in his ground game. So
did he tell him about eating one punches?
He did not. Now, Raufeon Stots, if we all know how good his wrestling is, we all know how good his striking is, once his jiu-jitsu does start to catch up to it, like it seems like that's kind of where his skill set's trending, if you will. Raufeon Stots can be a problem for a very long time. I know he's a little bit older to still have that prospect moniker next to his name at 31, but when you look at just his individual skills and what he's able to accomplish in the cage, it's phenomenal because there is no massive weakness to his game. Now, Keith Lee is going to have to show up the best version of himself. Again, Raufeon Stots is a heavy favorite for a reason, but Keith Lee is the type of athlete and is the type of fighter who could bring a really great fight out of Raufeon Stots. He can challenge him on the feet. He can challenge him on the floor. Because Keith Lee, the thing people forget, in the Vinicius Zaney fight, he looked really good on the feet in that. He was going to the body. He was going to the head. And I think that's a really important distinction. I don't want to say amateur, but the lower level strikers in MMA, it's always head hunting. It's always big hooks to the head. They never go to the body, sometimes to the legs. But Keith Lee has shown that he is starting to develop that part of his game a little bit. And at only 24, the sky's still the limit. I know he's had some split decision losses earlier on in his career, but things like that go on to make you better. And I do think that Keith Lee is going to make a great account of himself, even though it is pretty hard to not pick.
I mean, Bellator getting both of these guys, and I would say even Raufeon Stots more so, especially at the point in his career where he's at. That's a huge signing. They've done a lot of things like this. Achilles Moda, another one of those guys. I know that fight where, poor guy a couple weeks ago just gets head kicked where it was almost illegal. But Achilles Moda, again, another one of those fighters that you probably thought, knock wood, maybe Dana White's Contender Series UFC at a certain point. But Bellator continues to sign a lot of these names. Who is it? Usman Magomedov is another one of the fighters that they've signed here recently that I'm really looking forward to. Brendan Ridley saying, do the Allen Bros ever bet on Bellator? If so, where? The odds never make a whole lot of sense. So what we're going to do in this show more than anything is just preview the fights because we're very excited about Bellator. We still like Bellator. And it's one of those things where when they came back, it was just a matter of if and not when we keep going with the Bellator content. So let's look into, Matt, our full card. And again, it's a 9-fight slate. It's pretty quick. You got Darrion Caldwell taking on AJ McKee at the start. Bodog's one that you can look at if you're Canadian. Just
you have to
throwing that one
bet,
out
though,
there.
before the card starts. Because once the card starts, like, let's say Keith Lee's fighting Raufeon Stots, you can't bet on Darrion Caldwell versus AJ McKee, so just make sure you put in your bets before the card starts. That's all.
All right, so, Matt, again, Darrion Caldwell taking on AJ McKee in the main, but with Fight Name Picks and question mark kicks, we'll go down closer to the bottom. Hashtag Free Craig, Sam
Let's get
Sterner.
on that.
We appreciate you. That's why we're going live on a Wednesday. But if we have a look at this, you get Sullivan Cauley taking on Jason Marklin. And I put it up there, Matt, because you can see Marklin's pro record and his amateur record. And he's 0-1 as a pro. He had fought with Bellator in the past. That was his first fight. And if you look at Sullivan, he's a guy that trains primarily with, and they'll all talk about it, with Ryan Bader. And that'll be a major talking point of Mike Goldberg. I'm sure they're going to talk about everything being virtually identical. I have a look at this one. I mean, if you look up Jason Marklin over on Tapology, he's listed as 5'10 and 204. He's actually 6'3. And if you look at the pictures of both of these guys at weigh-ins, Marklin's taller than Cauley. I don't know if Marklin was wearing shoes and Cauley was wearing flip-flops, but Marklin actually is a little bit taller than Cauley. They both came in right at that 205-pound limit. I know Cauley's weighed in heavier before. He fought at heavyweight. He's weighed in around 220, but had no issues making the weight here. And I mean, overall, this is one of those fights that I would say, more than anything, a throwaway. But overall, I am looking forward to this fight. Do you have any major takeaways from this one?
Not really. Again, the fact that Cauley does train with Ryan Bader, they are going to force that a lot, especially on Bellator. Just for some reason, they like to do that. Because we call out Joe Rogan a lot for those, Joe Roganisms, the things that he has to bring up every single time. But they're going to be like that, especially with Cauley. It should be an interesting fight. Again, neither guy's amateur background's really going to blow your, boots off by any means. But it's kind of one of those classic early Bellator prelim fights. It'll be exciting. Are you going to even give an official prediction?
No, I mean, no. Like, I honestly can't. You've got Jason Marklin coming in. Oh, I should say this, actually. So there were a few fights that fell out this week. Sullivan Cauley was actually supposed to take on a different opponent. He was supposed to be taking on Mark Glover. Glover withdrew, so Marklin stepped in on less than a week's notice. He's 39 years old. He owns a fitness company, so it's pretty cool. If you check him out on Instagram, he's got a lot of stuff on the go. He's trained in the past with, some really good fighters. We had to look into it. Beastin 25-8, Bellator's own Corey Anderson, and David Branch as well. So it's kind of neat for Marklin. Maybe he pulls out a crafty veteran win. And for Sullivan Cauley, it's a good opportunity to make a Bellator debut. And you get to kind of push on that name of, well, Ryan Bader's my training partner. He's our heavyweight champ. I'm fighting at light heavyweight. Hey, that Daniel Cormier, Cain Velasquez, maybe we get a little bit of a rivalry there. But overall, I'm really looking forward to this one. And again, we look into our next fight. And Matt, I'm really interested in this one because we have I got them mixed up, but really we do have, there we go. We have JJ Wilson taking on Sergio DeBari, and I'm totally wrong because Tapology has these out of order. It actually is Kevin Ferguson Jr. taking on Kahim Murray. Now, Matt, this is one that I like because for Baby Slice, in his last fight out, it was a no contest, which is a little difficult because he picked up a really quick knockout win. And he's one of those guys that Bellator, they marketed him, but it's been in a weird way. Like, one of his last fights, I believe it was his last fight, they just kind of announced it like on a Wednesday when the fight was going to be on a Saturday. Oh, by the way, Baby Slice is on this card. And he's one of those guys that you would think, with Kimbo Slice being his father and a Bellator staple at a point, that they'd push him a little bit more, but now they don't seem to. So you got Baby Slice taking on 3-3 Kahim Murray. I checked out a couple of things on Kahim Murray. He seems pretty excited. He wants to kind of take the aura and the lore away from Baby Slice, which we've seen. We've seen him face, I wouldn't say less than stellar competition, but at least guys that you'd think he'd be able to beat. I remember that Corey Browning fight. And Corey Browning, a guy that would end up going on to fight the big Bellator name in the Geordie Shorefuller. But overall, I look at this. I mean, you look at Baby Slice's total body of work. Loses debut, Bellator 165, wins 3 in a row, loses to Browning, has that no contest against Craig Campbell, and now he's fighting Kahim Murray. So overall, what do you think on this one? It's one where I would expect, Baby Slice to pull out and get a win.
100%. This fight is just going to be a slobber knocker. You're not going to expect a lot of grappling in this because grappling's kind of both guys' Achilles heel. We've seen it with Kevin Ferguson Jr., Baby Slice, call him what you will. When he gets on his back, again, if you look at that TKO loss, it's not really like he got flatlined or anything like he was fighting Francis. He just couldn't get up because he gets tired, and then you can take him down. Now, Kahim Murray's not going to really follow that game plan. I really doubt he's going to work behind the jab, fake some takedowns, be real educated, work his way on the inside, take Kevin Ferguson Jr. down. It's going to be an absolute brawl for as long as it lasts. I favor Kevin Ferguson Jr. in a fight like this. it is nice to see that he didn't just rely on his dad's name. Ferguson Jr. does put the work in. He just had some bad matchups in Bellator, so I do think Bellator is kind of giving him not a softball toss of a win, but I do think he'll be able to get the W.
I would expect Baby Slice to get it as well. And I mean, as far as the odds are concerned on this fight, there's not a whole heck of a lot of value. I mean, Kevin Ferguson Jr. opened at minus 350. He's now minus 303. And you look at Kahim Murray opening at a plus 275. He's now at a plus 241. I agree with Phoenix Graves to a point. Anthony apparently liking the Oklahoma jersey. Are you a big Brian Bosworth fan like I am? Because that's the name on the back of it. I watched The Longest Yard the other day, so I had to wear it. But overall, yeah, you have to worry about the gas tank of Kevin Ferguson Jr. I know he's been a Team Body Shop guy. He's a guy that you look at his pictures in training and on Instagram, and he looks to carry around a lot of extra weight. And then you see him at weigh-ins, and he's pretty sunken in, which I don't like to see. So for Kevin Ferguson Jr., I know nobody missed weight on this card, which is like a Bellator first, because normally you see prelim fighters missing weight. He didn't. And with Kahim Murray, I mean, he's going in there full head of steam, and a guy like that's always dangerous. It's taking on one of those bigger names. You got nothing to lose. You're coming in here at 3-3. I mean, the skies could ultimately be the limit if you get a win like Corey Browning did. You get Aaron Chalmers after that, so who knows? But overall, Kevin Ferguson Jr. taking on Kahim Murray. It's a fight that's going to happen. Now, Matt, this was the fight that I was getting excited about. J.J. Wilson taking on Sergio DeBari. And we look at Sergio. He's coming out of New Jersey. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's really a good sign when you're taking on a guy like J.J. Wilson, who is so slick and slippery with his Jiu-Jitsu. He's a guy that really stole a lot of shine away from Taiwan Claxton his last fight. That was a weird fight. An odd decision in that one. It was back and forth. J.J. Wilson pushes a really good pace. Like I said, his jiu-jitsu's on point. I'm looking at his total body of work. Wasn't really the toughest competition until he really tried to make a staple in Bellator. Wins over Jorge Juarez by submission, Mario Navarro by armbar, and then the split decision win over your guy, Taiwan Claxton. So, Matt, overall, really fun fight. Sergio DeBari, he's taken on decent competition on the regional scene in the States, which is always good to see. It's not like this is a throwaway type of fight. Coming in here at 5-1. His only loss to Robert Watley, who right now is 12-3. So that was actually a really good name to take on. Loses that fight by decision 5 years ago. He's been inactive. One fight in 2014, one fight 2015, one in 16, one in 17, one in 18, one in 19. This is his token fight in 2020. Matt, overall takeaways, what are you thinking about this one?
This is a phenomenal fight, especially for Bellator prelim. And I know Bellator has been beefing up their prelims a little bit more as of late. They usually have kind of one or two, not stables of Bellator, but one or two really exciting prospects that people want to watch. J.J. Wilson's that guy in this card. If you're 6-0 and you even have a close fight with Taiwan Claxton, much less beat him, it tells you a lot about yourself. Claxton, a guy who we all know, he can not only flying knee you, he can take you down, he can dominate you on the ground. He's just a really good fighter at any range of MMA. And the fact that J.J. Wilson was able to go out there and beat him was really impressive. I know that the decision was kind of odd, but he made a really good account of himself. And his jiu-jitsu is the type that even a really good wrestler on top can have some issues with it. He's really slippery off his back. He can sweep too and get in top position. And I think this is a great matchup against DeBari too, because it's not like he's coming in fighting this great striker and he's only got the black belt in jiu-jitsu. No. J.J. Wilson's going to go out there and grapple, which is going to play to both guys' strengths. And I do think it'll make for a very, very fun fight. Primarily contested on the ground. Now, saying all that, I'm going to favor J.J. Wilson for sure, just because if the fight doesn't even make it to the floor, his striking it's not world class. It's not like he's Brian Ortega, who, if it's on the floor, watch out, and if it's on the feet, he's really good. He's getting there. He is making the improvements, but I really do think this is going to be a super fun grappling match, or it'll turn into one of those two grapplers decide to stand and trade, kind of like Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman. Not on that high of a level, of course, but I do think this is a phenomenal fight. I'm going to side with J.J. Wilson. He's just a really fun, exciting prospect right now, and if he does get this win, if you can go out there and beat another BJJ black belt, it's just kind of, not that the win itself means a lot for you, but just in the court of public opinion, J.J. Wilson's going to be a hot commodity.
And I got to say it here, and I'm going to kind of touch on Alan Moody's question, and Dimitri already started to answer it. But the prelims are on YouTube. We can watch those up here in Canada. For us, we're going to be watching the card on DAZN, the last 3 fights that are on there. I know there's a CBS play there in the States. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Let me check in the email. You can check it out on the CBS Sports Network and DAZN. So that's what it says in the official email with the weigh-ins. Both these guys, for what it's worth, J.J. Wilson weighing in at 145.7. Sergio DeBari weighing in at 144.7. So both guys making weight. And overall, again, Matt, having a look at this one, J.J. Wilson's kind of in that category, like, they had A.J. Agazarm, now he's gone because he was bad and mean. And apparently he said he's going to compete for the UFC in some form or another next year, assuming that's a Dana White's Contender Series type of approach. But J.J. Wilson, kind of in that category, and I know the reason why Agazarm's no longer there was Chris Lencioni, but a guy kind of similar to Chris Lencioni, who's also no longer with Bellator, whether his contract ran out or what have you. But overall, I'm really looking forward to this one. I think J.J. Wilson's one of those guys you can really build around, and at 6-0, like you said, pretty good opportunity. If we can touch on the odds just quick, this is, again, another one of those ones that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Wilson opened to minus 350. He's down to minus 410. He beat a guy that was in the Bellator Featherweight Grand Prix in Taiwan Claxton, so there's that. And now you're taking on Sergio DeBari. It's just because Bellator makes weird decisions about matchmaking, and this is one of those weird ones. So, getting into our next fight, Matt, this is one of my favorite fights on the card. We have the former LFA welterweight champion Jaleel Willis making his Bellator debut. And I say debut, he's making his debut in 2020 with the promotion. Taking on Mark Lemminger, a guy who I've been following for quite some time. Lemminger's not an easy out. And again, I'm looking at Jaleel Willis's record here right in front of us. Again, I said it's really a return because he competed for Bellator at Bellator 162, had a fight with World Series, only lost on the card to Kyle Stewart, who ended up in the UFC, and Harvey Park, a guy that a lot of people know from the regional scene in the States. He's on a 4-fight win streak, beating Vinicius de Jesus to win that belt. And again, a good point by Tristan. This is a really good fight. And Anthony wants to see us as coaches on The Ultimate Fighter.
That would be awesome for TV, but terrible for the fighters trying to get better at fighting.
I mean, we could have fun.
That would be about it, is the problem.
Tristan makes another good point, too. So for Mark Lemminger, he got pieced up by Yaroslav Amosov, and he did in his last fight.
It's going to happen.
But that's going to happen. For Jaleel Willis, too, they had pictures of that fight. Jaleel Willis was supposed to make his debut against Patricky Pitbull.
Now, now Patricky Pitbull had the weird, I'm not even really sure what the condition was called. It was labyrinthitis, I believe. As Craig pulls up, labyrinthitis. Jaleel Willis, interesting fact, he had said that he can't make 155 anymore, that would have been his last fight at 155. The only reason he wanted that fight at 155 was because it was against such a big name. But he really does believe that 170 is going to be his weight class in Bellator. He was really disappointed he didn't get sort of an extended contract after he had that first win in Bellator in 2016. It feels like now is the perfect time to finally join that big organization. He's won titles outside Bellator. He kind of... Not that he knows himself better as a person, but he has established his skill set far beyond what he used to be at. And Jaleel Willis can just kind of get everything done at this point. Phenomenal wrestler. We see how good his striking is. He's a bit of that, I'm a really good wrestler and I have super heavy hands too. But Mark Lemminger, he's no one's punk. Like, yes, he lost to Amosov, but that's going to happen to anybody. Logan Storley got tired against him. So it just... This is a super fun fight, and I don't think Mark Lemminger is getting the respect he deserves against an opponent like Jaleel Willis.
I don't either, and I really don't think odds makers are giving a good account of Mark Lemminger. The odds on... Actually, you know what? That's a lie. So they opened a par. They did give him a fine opportunity. People put money down really quickly. Jaleel Willis at this point is a minus 203 favorite. He's the third biggest mover and shaker on the card at 42%. And your underdog, Mark Lemminger, coming in at about a plus 160. And again, if you want to talk about Mark Lemminger and some of the names that he's faced, the losses. Jason Witt got finished by him in 2018, who's now in the UFC. Picked up a big win over Mark Lemminger's training partner, Cole Williams, in his last fight for Jason Witt. And again, for Lemminger, loses that one to Amosov at the end of the first round. Picked up a big win over Uber Smitty, Jake Smith, but that was on short notice. Originally, Lemminger was supposed to be taking on Logan Storley at that event. He'd also been matched up this year with Carlo Pedersoli and Ion Pascu, but those fights fell out. So overall, it is a really good fight. Anthony's saying that you like Lemminger, but it's close. I agree with you as well. Booch for Snooch likes Lemminger. It's a tough fight to call. This is one of those ones, again, it's a Bellator card, and if I don't want to give picks, I don't have to. So I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't run to the bank with any of these picks. So I'm just going to enjoy this fight for what it's worth.
we're called Fight Night picks. I'm going to make a pick. I do like Mark Lemminger in this, but I do think Jalil Willis will be able to do a similar game plan to what Amosov did. Maybe his striking isn't at that level yet, but Jalil Willis can hold you down, and he has phenomenal ground and pound. So I do see it going his way, although I do think this fight is going to be very close.
Who do you pick?
Jalil Willis.
Okay, you said Lemminger to start. All right.
Oh, sorry.
I've got Willis as well, if you really want to pick out of me. So if we're going... Again, the first fight, call it a wash, really. You got a guy making his pro debut against a guy who's 0-1 on short notice. I like Wilson over DeBari. And then if we look at the next one, I've got Willis over Lemminger. So we look at our next fight, Matt. And when I found out about this fight, holy smokes was I ever excited. And the reason being, Jeremy Kennedy was my guy when he was in the UFC. And it was a bit of a Canadian thing. But Jeremy Kennedy could really do it all. And then he faced Alexander Volkanovski. And then he was out of the UFC. It's
gonna happen.
And you look at Jeremy Kennedy's record in the UFC, and it was like, well, what? This doesn't make any sense because he lost to future champ Alexander Volkanovski. So then Kennedy kind of bounced around. He went here and there. I remember the rumors when he was going to go over to Brave. He did beat Daniel Pilo. Then he beat Murat Magomedov. 2 really big wins. He loses to Luis Rafael Laurentino. And then he ends up beating him at the end of the PFL season. The no contest against Daniel Pineda at the very end, that was a loss, but it was overturned due to the PEDs, and then Daniel Pineda gets to go to the UFC. He also has a win over former UFC vet and longtime PFL guy, I guess you could say, in 2 seasons, and Steven Seiler. But overall, again, you really have to watch out for Jeremy Kennedy. And for Matt Bessette, I have to tell this story. So, again, put my fan hat on. When Craig was an MMA fan, I went to Boston. And we're trolling around. We're having a good time. UFC 220. And I'm with my buddies. And we sat in the nosebleeds. And we were so excited for that card. We got to meet Habib. We're walking around Quincy Market. And we ran into Dana White and his entourage. Got some pictures. That was all fun and games. Then we're sitting up in the nosebleeds, and Matt, the Mangler Bessette, comes out to take on Enrique Barzola. And Matt, I tell you, the amount of Matt Bessette fans that were sitting up there in the nosebleeds with us, it was insane. That was Bessette's UFC debut. It's at home in Boston. Come on, Matt! Come on, Mangler! And he got beat pretty bad in that decision. He loses a split decision to Ocho Peterson. Then he's out of the UFC. Contemplated retirement. That was the way it was looking. He comes back with CES, only with CES, because that's where he'd competed before. Beats Tim Dooling, beats Charles Cheeks III. Matt, what do you make of this fight? Because if I'm not mistaken, only one of these guys did interviews in the media.
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to talk to Jeremy Kennedy, and he gave me some great answers, too. I'd asked him, what's he been doing with all this time off since the last time he competed in PFL? Because, of course, PFL had that weird thing where they might let fighters go fight, and then they didn't do it for a long time. So then he had signed with Bellator, and he said that he's just really focused on jiu-jitsu ever since, COVID lockdown, and I guess really just ever since his last fight, really fell in love with the gi again. He's been working a lot on his jiu-jitsu, and I think that's great because Jeremy Kennedy is a great striker. He's a really good volume striker. You're not going to see a lot of one-punch Jeremy Stevens-esque knockouts, but he is a very high-level striker. He's good defensively too, has great footwork. His wrestling at one point, that's what Volkanovski was able to take advantage of him, but with Volkanovski, again, you're losing to the guy who many people consider the best. Well, not even. He's the best featherweight in the world. He's Alexander Volkanovski. He has that UFC title. And yes, Patricio has a bit of a claim to that, but it's still Volkanovski. So he loses to him and then leaves the UFC. And I was really upset because, again, Jeremy Kennedy, not that you're always cheering for Canadians, but when they are on a card, you're always a little bit perked up for it. And he was a guy, too, who you might not see him winning a title in his future, but you did see Jeremy Kennedy as a guy who could fight any guy in the top 15 and make a strong account of himself. Unfortunately, he left. But against Matt Bessette in Bellator, this is kind of a favorable matchup for Jeremy Kennedy. What does Jeremy Kennedy do well? Pretty much everything. There's not a massive weakness to his game. He's a great example of just a well-rounded MMA fighter. And I don't mean that as negative in the slightest, because Jeremy Kennedy's quite good at everything. He's great at submissions. He's got really good ground and pound. The striking's great. With Matt Bessette, he can do some of the things that Jeremy Kennedy do, but when it comes to all those X factors and the in-betweens, Jeremy Kennedy has those. He has the scrambling ability. He throws really good kicks, throws good leg kicks, and he can mix it up too. With Matt Bessette, you know what you're going to get from a fight like him. He's going to go out on his shield. He can throw 1,000 strikes per round. He does have that really high output, so this could be a phenomenal fight for as long as it lasts. I just see that if Matt Bessette starts to have any level of success, Jeremy Kennedy can immediately take him down, and for lack of a better term, I do think he'll kind of dominate him on the ground. I do think Jeremy Kennedy, kind of that next level of, and I like Tristan's comment there, Kennedy is a solid grinder. This is exactly what he is. Now, he will go for those finishes as the fight progresses. He can get the finishes early. We start to see that a little bit more in PFL, so I'm actually really excited for Jeremy Kennedy in Bellator.
I'm really excited for this fight, Matt, because it seems like every single show that I'm on, I end up talking about Jeremy Kennedy. I don't know why. I just bring him up because I was really salty when he left. The same thing with Gerald Harris when the UFC decided, you know what, Gerald, you're having a good run. He was, 3-1 at the time? See you later. You look at his run in the UFC. He beat Alex Ricci, beat Ronnie Jason, he beat Kyle Bochniak, Hani. What did I see? I saw Hani Jason. He was in the news this week.
Yeah, for not good reasons. Just keep on.
And then the Volkanovski loss. You're 3-1, and then you just let him walk. So, again, I do like Jeremy Kennedy in this one. He's a huge favorite.
Yes, sometimes you pick Tanner Boser and he loses a close fight to Andrei Arlovski. It's going to happen to everyone at least once in their life.
But again, overall, you look at the odds for this one, and they're silly. They don't make a lot of sense. Jeremy Kennedy opened a -400 favorite. He's now a -447. Bessette opened a +300. He's now a +339.
Jeremy Kennedy, big chip on his shoulder, too. There's no Wendy's where he is right now, and he wants those junior bacon cheeseburgers afterwards, so he did promise me that when he gets home, he'll have plenty lined up, but unfortunately, he won't be able to join, or to enjoy one, I guess, tomorrow after the fight, so.
BC's Wendy's, making that money. All right, Matt, this is my fight of the night. We got Keith Lee at 7-3, taking on Raufeon Stots, a guy who's already at 14-1. You talk about that loss, the, come on, Marab, quick loss. But overall, he's put together such a nice body of work, picking up big wins in Bellator. Again, that Cass Bell fight, it was one where experience was definitely on Stots' side, but for him to get a submission win over such a great jiu-jitsu practitioner in MMA, Cass Bell's sneaky. He's the type of guy, he's not a Ryan Hall because striking isn't near that level whatsoever, but he's sneaky when he goes to fish for a leg, or he goes to try and grab your back.
Exactly.
He does so many neat things, and for Raufeon Stots to implement his wrestling, really work his striking, in and out, and then submit Bell really showed me that Raufeon Stots, man, he is poised for a run at 135 pounds, and I mean, you look at that division, who's your champ right now?
Juan Archuleta.
Juan Archuleta. So you have Archuleta, you have Mix, you have Stots up near the top. I don't think Caldwell's ever going to come back down. I know he says he wants to.
He is more than capable to go back down to 135 and beat anyone who's ever weighed that in their life. So Darrion Caldwell is extremely confident that after this tournament, when he wins the title, these are his words, that he is going to go down to 135 and challenge for that again. And that seems to be a little bit of the theme of this Bellator Featherweight Grand Prix. Everyone who wants to win the belt kind of wants to switch division shortly after. A lot of them see AJ McKee, talk to him. I'll get to that a little bit later. But Darrion Caldwell, same thing. He had mentioned, like, yeah, if I win the 145-pound belt, I'll just go down to 135. So really interesting, kind of weird, I guess, if you will, because you would like that after the tournament happens, you have a lot of people sticking around, and then, you know, you'll figure out who your number one contender is. But it does seem like everyone just wants to switch weight divisions immediately after.
That was what it was. Orlando asking, what did Mr. Jason do? He lost in an election. He ran in a local election in Brazil. So did Yuri Alcantara, and they both lost where they were at. We appreciate Craig, and it's not just me paying me, so we appreciate you. You've got a great first name. Kudos to your parents for giving you that. But overall, again, it is a really competitive fight. There was no opportunity to talk to Stots, was there?
No, I was unfortunately not able to talk to him, but Keith Lee, superbly confident. Now, Keith Lee is in that kind of Cowboy Cerrone, Dustin Poirier camp where it's, okay, I just had my first kid. Things change in your life. Now, I don't know. I don't have any kids. But Keith Lee recently had a newborn daughter, so congratulations to Keith Lee. And he just loves being a dad. He loves that more than anything. That's what you could get from talking to him. It's kind of given him a whole new motivation around fighting. I know that's a very cliche thing to say. I'm sure when you have kids, it does change your outlook on life. But Keith Lee is just uber dedicated. Like, he wants not only a better life for himself, but for his daughter and his newly growing family, if you will. And he does want it to be not just Kevin Lee's brother, Keith Lee. He said that earlier on in his career, it did bother him a little bit that that's what he was known as, but now that he is starting to get, not a crazy amount of notoriety on his own, but he is starting to kind of become his own fighter, he's very happy with somewhat, you know, the more exposure that comes with that. Keith Lee has a very good skill set. He is well-rounded. He's a great grappler. For Raufeon Stots, though, again, when you have that good of a wrestling background, then you decide to go to Rufus Sport, one of the best striking coaches in the world, and now you're showing the ability to actually submit, not only submit in an MMA fight, but to submit primary grapplers. Like, Raufeon Stots, again, you don't know because the whole Marab fight didn't go that way, But Raufeon Stots, if he keeps on going on this trajectory, I'd love to see that rematch in the future. He's one of those guys. He's still fairly young in his career. I know 31 at bantamweight, you're starting to get a little bit worried, but still, I do think that he's got a lot of miles left. He's still young in MMA years. It's not like he's taken a lot of damage throughout his career. And I'm really excited to see where Raufeon Stots goes from this, because I'll give my prediction. Raufeon Stots is probably going to win this fight. He's not the next guy in Bellator, but he is kind of who Bellator is setting up to be their next 135-pound contender. So I do think Stots is going to win. But Keith Lee is still very young, and we see a new Keith Lee every time he goes out there and fights. We never see the same version. His striking is continuously improving, so if he can go out there, stuff a few takedowns, and make it competitive on the feet, I think we could get a very fun fight.
I think we're going to get a fun fight, too, and I mean, that's why I picked it as my fight of the night. Now, Matt, again, this is another one of those ones where I just don't see a whole lot of value in the odds. You look at Stots, he opened a minus 350. A lot of late money coming in today on Mr. Keith Lee. Stots went from a minus 331 up to a minus 278. And if you look at Keith Lee, open a plus 275 is now plus 216. So a lot of people agreeing with the fact that Keith Lee has more than an opportunity here. But I do like Raufeon Stots, man. I mean, I've seen him win fights against wrestlers, against strikers, and again, that Cass Bell fight really did put him over for me. For Keith Lee, his last two, though, big wins.
Now, after the Bell fight, Stots said he wants those killers in the division. Now, he wasn't really given that in this fight, no disrespect to Keith Lee, just he's not really one of those established guys in Bellator, so hopefully he does get his wish after this, and they are able to match him up with maybe not a title fight next, but at least match him up with one of those Bellator veterans. Bring Joe Warren out of retirement, maybe, who knows, but just one of those guys who's been around for a while, who does have that name attached to them. Kind of like how the UFC is using Cub Swanson all of a sudden, where it's just, okay, he's an established name, you know you're going to get a fun fight out of him. Let's match him up with Raufeon Stots. So hopefully he does get an opponent with a little bit more notoriety just to get his own name out there a little bit more.
I mean, in that Bellator purge, Joe Warren retirement, Pat Kern retirement, so yeah, it's pretty, that sucks. It just sucks. Now, Matt, we move on to our main card portion of this Bellator 253 event. We have Black Ice Joey Davis taking on Bobby Lee. Bobby Lee coming in from CFFC with a 12-4 total record. Joey Davis unbeaten at 7-0. Matt, this should be a really good fight. I mean, listen, Bobby Lee's really excited for this one. Joey Davis obviously undefeated. He's been a career Bellator fighter since his debut back in 2016. Out of his total wins, he has but 2 decisions, 5 total finishes, all of them in the first round. And I mean, if you look at his last 2, Chris Cisneros and Jeff Peterson, I mean, hammer fist and flying knee and a punch. This guy is such a good wrestler. You really have to worry about that. But he's really improved his striking. And Matt, he just happens to be training with one of the best fighters in the promotion and also one of the best fighters that's on this card.
Yeah, Joey Davis, well, really, Team Body Shop is represented very well throughout this card. But yeah, Joey Davis is kind of the primary wrestler of Team Body Shop. So for him to be at Fight Week with AJ McKee, he said it himself, it's a lot more comfortable when you're just around friends all week. Because you can only imagine how stressful Fight Week would be. Because you know, okay, you're just counting down the days till you have to get into a fist fight with another man in a cage that thousands, if not millions of people are going to watch. I can imagine that's a nerve-wracking experience. So he didn't speak to just how comfortable it is. He has all of his coaches, he has all of his friends around. It makes Fight Week a lot less stressful, and it makes the competing itself a lot easier. These two men are the most different just humans, I think, on planet Earth. Bobby Lee, just couldn't get enough talking to the media. He really enjoyed the whole media call. He couldn't answer enough questions, gave these very long answers. And he said it himself. He's like, listen, I'm being brought in here to lose. I realize that Joey Davis is kind of like the Bellator guy. And it's a good attitude to have, your Bobby Lee. And this is what he said. He said, no one expects me to win, so I don't really have anything to lose. And I think that's a very important quote, because if you're Bobby Lee, yeah, you're going in. I'm sure they're paying him well. He is on a 4-fight contract. This isn't just a one and done for Bobby Lee. But for him, yeah, no one's expecting much of you. It just allows you to go out there and compete. You don't have that own pressure on yourself, because if no one expects you to win and you are able to pull it off, you're in the news cycle for weeks, if not months. And if you lose to a guy like Joey Davis, Bobby Lee's still the former CFFC, at least interim welterweight champion, so it's not like he's just another guy. I do think Bobby Lee, win, lose, or draw, is going to go on to have a fairly successful Bellator career. It's the fact that they're matching him up with Joey Davis, who is, again, not to use this term, but he is sort of that golden boy. All of his fights are in Bellator. They've had him ever since he's really started doing MMA. And just last stat on Joey Davis, He's a 4-time Division II All-American, and he had never even lost a single match in all of his collegiate career. He's one of only 3 people to ever do that. That tells you the kind of grappling credentials that Joey Davis has.
Joey Davis, now obviously I made a mistake with the record and kept the record of Benson Henderson in for Joey Davis. He's actually 7-0, not 28-9. But apart from that mistake, again, he's one of those guys, and you can kind of compare him to, well, who have we seen from wrestling transition into MMA? Bellator loves to do that, especially early on in a guy's career. You saw it with Aaron Pico. You've seen it with more and more. Sean Bunch was another guy that they pushed out there a lot. They kind of want that shine of, well, Daniel Cormier could do it with Strikeforce, so we're just going to try and develop our own homegrown talent. And like you said, AJ McKee, Joey Davis, the Picos, there's more and more, and you're going to keep seeing them. But Joey Davis, I mean, it's 7-0. It's kind of insane the way that his career has kind of gone. And you look at the amount of fights that he's had. 1 in 2016, 1 in 2017, 2 in 2018, 2 in 3 in 2019. And this is his first time out in 2020. And again, for Bobby Lee, he's been active. He last fought back in September. He was supposed to take a fight against Jeremiah Wells. That fell out. He gets Mike Hill for that interim belt. And you look at the losses. Jeff Peterson, a guy whose name's already popped up in some of our videos. Killy Smota, who we already mentioned. DeMarcus Jackson that you've seen. And Macon Mendonça. That's a bit of a salty one. But overall, like you said, he's one of those guys that, I mean, he knows it. He's got nothing to lose. He said it himself. Bellator is bringing him in to lose, but he opened a plus 200. He's now plus 371. For Joey Davis, went from a minus 260 to a minus 512. That's insane. He is the second biggest mover and shaker at a 49% clip.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this fight. I understand he's a massive favorite. I get it with Joey Davis. Bobby Lee's not just going to roll over, though. Joey Davis, again, all of his wins are in the first round, except for the 2 decisions. But when he's finishing people, it's normally coming very quick in the fight. Bobby Lee's not just going to get hit, fall down, and it be over. Now, I said that against Joe Mearshart when he fought Hamzat Chimaev, and guess what? You're wrong every now and then. And I was definitely wrong in that situation. Joey Davis is probably going to win this fight. Again, I'm very excited for Bobby Lee's career going forward. Fun fact, Bobby Lee plans to call out Michael Venom Page if he wins. Little spoiler alert on that one, but he did let us know that, again, he's in the fight business. If you're going to fight big names, you might as well keep on doing it after your first fight. So if he beats Joey Davis, expect an MVP call out from your boy Bobby Lee.
That would be very interesting, and I mean, hey, why not? The guy's young, too. He's only 24 years old. That much is true. I just made the one mistake with the record. So we move on to a fight where a guy actually is 28-9, taking on one fellow who's 12-4. Matt, this is your fight of the night. In our co-main event, the former UFC lightweight champ, a man who was put on a poster in WEC, Benson Henderson, and hey, taking on Jason Jackson. This is a great fight, but it's a very interesting fight for a lot of different reasons. I mean, Benson Henderson is a legend of the game. He has to be considered up there with some of the best of all time, really. And you look at him in Bellator, his Bellator run's been against some really, really good competition. There's only one fight I can think of off the top of my head where you go, do we really need to see Roger Huerta and Benson Henderson? But apart from that, Benson Henderson's taken on some names.
Oh, he has. Benson Henderson, again, this is the issue. When you're a guy like Benson Henderson, doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter what your record is, how many losses you've had, or when your last loss was, you can't just fight a regular guy anymore. It'll never happen. Now, unless you're BJ Penn and you're just in Hawaii not fighting in the cage, you normally are going to have to fight a very established name or an up-and-coming prospect because Bellator is going to want to use your name, either to give your opponent shine or to kind of keep your run going. Benson Henderson recently lost to Michael Chandler, and didn't just recently lost. He recently got KO'd quite badly against Michael Chandler in a fight where it's not like he just got held down and got TKO'd. Like, he got cracked with a shot, dropped, and then ate a lot of ground and pound. I'm not saying that's going to happen in this fight. Jason Jackson's much bigger than Michael Chandler. I doubt he's as explosive as Michael Chandler. And again, Chandler's in the UFC fighting for belts or for number one contendership right away. That tells you what kind of a fighter you're dealing with. Jason Jackson is going to be able to take advantage of some of the holes that Benson Henderson has at this stage of his career. It's something we talk about a lot. Benson Henderson has taken the LeBron James approach to MMA, where it is as physically, you aren't as explosive as you were in the past. You're starting to slow down a little bit. Exactly. You become smarter. And his fight IQ is almost second to none.
I got to talk about the win streak that he had before that Michael Chandler loss. Because if you go back through it, he beat Roger Huerta. All right, again, maybe that fight shouldn't have happened. He had the split. Let's go all the way back. So he has that Koreshkov fight in his debut. That was bad. He beats Patricio Pitbull in a fight that was weird. Split decision loss to Michael Chandler.
One of the better fights in Bellator history.
Split decision loss to Patricky Pitbull. Then he beats Huerta. He beats Syed Awad. He beats Piccolotti. He beats Miles Jury. And then he has the fight against Chandler where he gets knocked out. I have to say this. Benson Henderson looked sharp AF in the Huerta fight, the Awad fight, the Piccolotti fight, and the Jury fight. Yeah. Now, Awad was on the way down. Roger Huerta, after the SI cover. Piccolotti, not quite up to snuff, I would say, and that was a split decision loss.
Beat the brakes off Miles Jury.
Good on Piccolotti. Beat the brakes out of Miles Jury. So really, Benson Henderson was sharp. He was smooth, some would say. But Jason Jackson, man, like, I hold this guy in really high regard. Like, if you had a Jason Jackson in, you got to do it. If you had Jason Jackson in the UFC, he would have some very competitive fights against those 25 to 15 type of guys.
I'm not going to go that far just yet because, again, you beat Jordan Meehan, so yes, you might be able to put him in that category. It's just really hard to say that he would have competitive... Like, I'd love to see Jason Jackson fight Nico Price. I know Nico Price has fought his teammate, Vicente Luque, twice, but that'd be a great fight. Donald Cerrone. Like, guys like that, yes, he could be in fun fights, but it's really hard to say that he'd be in the top 15 of welterweight, or even near the top 15 of welterweight, because you have... in the UFC, not only some of the best welterweights in the world, those are some of the best fighters. Like, Gilbert Burns has had to wait almost a year to get his title shot, and he beat Tyron Woodley. It wasn't even close, really. If he beat Woodley a year before, he'd be champ right now. So it's hard to put exactly where Jason Jackson's ceiling is, but this is a phenomenal fight for him. And especially, like I said before, if you're Jason Jackson, that's all I would do. I would only fight ex-UFC guys. They have the biggest name. They have a lot of eyes coming in on them. And again, Benson Henderson's going to test Jason Jackson. I'm not going to say Jason Jackson's going to go in there and knock him out in the first round like Michael Chandler did, because let's be honest, it's probably not going to happen. Michael Chandler is one of the more durable fighters you'll ever find, really, and you know he's never going to get tired. So one thing about Jason Jackson, he is a massive welterweight, and he's super explosive. So Benson Henderson can avoid that. Not storm, because Jason Jackson is a very technical striker, and he's not just going to kind of, for lack of a better term, blow his load early on in the fight. I do think Benson can extend this fight and make it really competitive. The question is, you have Jason Jackson, who is this massive welterweight, who is moving his way up, against a Bendo who's a little bit older. He's not as fast as he once was. You kind of hear the narrative that I'm starting to set up. And Jason Jackson's probably going to win this fight. It's unfortunate because when you watch Benson your whole entire life, you really want that guy at 37 to be the same guy that he was at 29 and 30 when you do remember him at his peak, but I just don't think we're going to get that version of Benson Henderson.
Jason Jackson, Laureano Staropoli, that'd be a fun one. What about the guy that Staropoli just fought that's fighting on the UFC card this weekend? Tim Means, that's a good fight. Tim Means, Jason Jackson, yeah, I'd watch it.
I'm here for it.
I think there's a lot of good fights that you can make for Jason Jackson, and then he just builds from there because, again, you're going to hit a point in this Bellator welterweight division where you beat Benson Henderson and you had that fight against Ed Ruth. John Fitch retired. Rory McDonald's gone. So who do you fight? Naaman Gracie next? Like, there's only so many guys up there, and then there's Lima, and Lima's up here. Now, was the fight against Gegard great? Well, the end of it was. The end of it got pretty good, but overall, in that division, it's tough. So I'm siding with you. Again, Jason Jackson's like one of my guys. He's the guy that, like, you know, we've got those Piotr Jans. We've got those guys on
we have our eye on a little bit.
Jason Jackson's one of those guys. If he loses this fight, I mean, maybe it could happen. So let's talk about that. If Benson Henderson's going to win this fight, what would he need to do? Because I have to say, in those technical fights, in that 4-fight win streak that he had before the Chandler fight, it was a lot of volume striking, a lot in and out, and a lot of, if somebody went to take him down or vice versa, a lot of really quick scrambles.
Oh, 100%. You know what you're going to get from Benson Henderson fight? He's not going to finish a lot of people. Let's just call it what it is. He's not going out there to, put a beat down on you like Justin Gaethje. He's a very smart fighter. He's a very technical fighter. He will play the long game because Jason Jackson's going to come out like an absolute monster. You would have to assume. Test the chin of Benson, really put it on him early to see where his durability is, because he got knocked out by Michael Chandler, and I know Michael Chandler's a much better fighter than Jason Jackson, a more complete fighter, but Jason Jackson, power-wise, is probably going to match Michael Chandler. He might not for technique, and he might not be able to hit some of the same holes that Chandler does, but if Jason Jackson just straight up hits you across the head, there's a chance you go to sleep. Benson, he has to get past that early storm. He has to mix in his wrestling. He has to do everything that not only got him to the UFC title that long ago, he has to do the things that have kept him successful this late into his career. He has to be the intelligent fighter, go for a lot of takedowns, and I don't mean to secure them. I just mean to give Jason Jackson something to think of, because we see this a lot in fights. It'll be kind of kickboxing throughout the first round. Okay, not a lot happened. And then one corner will tell their fighter, at least fake the takedown. And then they start to do that, and really opens up a lot of other parts in their game. Benson Henderson is the more well-rounded out of these two. It's just the fact that if Jason Jackson can defend the takedowns of Benson and start to put it on him on the feet, I don't know how Benson's going to answer that.
It's going to be a tough one. And again, FM, you got Henderson in this one. It's tough for me. It's weird, too, because Jason Jackson opened a plus 145. That line dropped off the bat to minus 200. He's now at a minus 182. For Benson Henderson, opening up at a minus 175. He's now at a plus 149. You call it 150.
So...
yeah, go ahead.
Benson Henderson only has one goal, by the way. I mentioned that he said he only has 2 years left. He only has one goal for those last 2 years. He needs the Bellator 155-pound belt. It is this goal. He wouldn't really explain.
Get that out of this.
I understand, but he wouldn't explain it to anyone. He wouldn't really go into great detail as to why that belt means so much to him. But that is his final goal. And he believes that, okay, if I can stay active against Jason Jackson, yes, I lost to Michael Chandler, but everyone knows I can make 155 fairly easily. It's never been a hard weight cut for him. Really lean guy, so like 170, I doubt he cuts a lot of weight to get to.
Weighed in at exactly 170 pounds. Both guys ran on the button at 170.
Exactly.
True professionals.
And he says that it only takes about 3 or 4 weeks. That's all he would need to get down to 155. So I think Benson Henderson's probably thinking, okay, if I get this win, it keeps my name in the headlines. It makes people remember me as a winner, not of my last performance. And then he can go back down to 155 and fight, maybe not for the belt right away, but at least fight in a number one contender or a fight that gets him in that direction. That's all.
All right, Matt. So let's get into our main event of the evening. You got the former Bellator bantamweight champion, Darrion Caldwell, a guy that, Matt, I remember when I was getting more into Bellator, back into Bellator, you had Darrion Caldwell just absolutely wrecking house, beating everybody out there, the Leandro Higos of the world, taking on AJ McKee, the mercenary. And Matt, for AJ McKee, 16-0, they talk about it all the time, that crazy win streak, the fact that he's been with Bellator for such a long time. They always bring up his father, who had a fight not that long ago. Good old Antonio taking a fight for the boys at Team Body Shop. Team Body Shop's gone through some weird changes here lately. I know one of their big staples was always Aaron Pico. He's no longer there. You still have Baby Slice. You still have McKee. You still have Joey Davis, Black Ice. I look at this fight as a tougher fight than those odds would suggest. I mean, AJ McKee opened a minus 205. Now he's at a minus 337. I don't see any value. Darrion Caldwell opened a plus 165. He's now a plus 256. I look at this fight, Matt, and my question to you before you get into anything, this fight seems so black and white to me.
Oh, yeah.
Darrion Caldwell, to get a win, does the same thing every single time. If he wins, forward pressure right off the bat in the first 5 seconds, and he's trying to chain takedowns together. He wraps your legs, he holds you down, and then he just switches positions. It's very much like watching a Jake Shields fight when you watch a Darrion Caldwell fight. His striking, I would think, he trains primarily with Bobby Green. You think maybe the striking would kind of catch up
out shoulder rolling?
to the shoulder rolls, but it never really has. Prince Vegeta's son, I apologize with my Dragon Ball Z references, but hey, caught the Tag Team Canada live. FM saying, will Jake Hager be fighting for a belt anytime soon? He's terrible.
He's not good at all.
He's terrible.
His last fight was like entertaining.
He barely beat a 40-year-old guy from the regional scene. This fight, though, Darrion Caldwell, AJ McKee, very well matched. Yep. I'm glad we're at this part of the Featherweight Grand Prix. And like I tried to say, for Caldwell, it's going to be one way. AJ McKee's not just a one-track fighter, though, and he certainly brings it. To me, the fight that showed me and really won me over with AJ McKee, not that it took a whole lot of convincing, was the Georgie Karkanyan fight, where he had all those combos. He knew, maybe I'm going to have to mix in the takedowns. Maybe I'm going to have to
5 seconds.
Maybe I'm going to have to mix in the grappling. And yeah, he knocks him out in 5 seconds. And it was like, wha-bam, we're done. Still.
Okay, AJ McKee thinks he's going to finish this one in the first round, and he can tell you exactly how. AJ McKee thinks that Darrion Caldwell is going to rush across the cage like Craig had described. But AJ McKee plans on hitting him with an elbow and triangling him off his back, which is the most Tony Ferguson game plan I've ever heard, but it could go through. Now, AJ McKee, I was able to ask a neat question, just kind of, what have you been doing since your last fight? Do you think the crowd's going to play a big factor? Just because AJ McKee is one of those Bellator guys. Like, when you think of Bellator as a brand, the first guys that always come to my mind was, well, formerly Michael Chandler, Douglas Lima. Ryan Bader was starting to kind of get into that category, of course. And AJ McKee's right there along with them. I understand he's never had a belt, but just the fact that all 16 of his fights have been with the organization, and they believed in him so much since the start of his career. Here's the other cool thing about AJ McKee, too. He can knock you out. He can choke you out. He is so well-rounded. And he is that. He's a finisher, if nothing else. He can choke you out off his back. He can finish you on the feet. Between these guys, the striking's not even close. AJ McKee's a much better striker than Darrion Caldwell. And like you had said, if we want to oversimplify this, Can Darrion Caldwell take down AJ McKee? That's all you need to know. If he can do it once, he can do it 5 times. He can win 5 rounds that way. If AJ McKee can defend a takedown and keep his back off the cage, we heard that a lot. How many times did we hear that before Khabib fought Gaethje? What's Gaethje's game plan? And he would always say, well, no one else has figured it out, but I know what to do. Keep my back off the cage. It's a lot easier said than done because Darrion Caldwell's game is based 100% around getting you to the cage and then down on the ground. He does have kind of Khabib-esque striking where he'll just run forward and kind of throw a lot at you. Hot take, Khabib's a way better striker than Darrion Caldwell. At least Khabib has shown in the later half of his career that when he wants to on the feet, he is a very good striker. Caldwell has such a good wrestling pedigree, and he knows how dominant it is. He just goes right to his bread and butter. And you appreciate that, because how many years did we see the Josh Koscheck's, the Johnny Hendricks, the Dan Hendersons go, here's all this great wrestling experience, let's just throw it away and we'll turn into strikers. Now, I don't think Darrion Caldwell's going to do that in this fight. The interesting thing that I'm having trouble with is if Darrion Caldwell gets AJ McKee to the ground, it's not 100% easy from that point on. McKee he can attack off his back. He does do some of those Ferguson-esque techniques where he'll throw elbows off his back to try to damage you. All that stuff is going to add up throughout the fight. And with Darrion Caldwell, you know what it's going to be. It's going to be that takedown round after round. And let's say Caldwell does get 10-8 round 1. It's a lot of top control. He wins round 2. But in round 3, he can't get that takedown. AJ McKee will start lighting him up on the feet. I truly do believe that. I'm a little curious to see AJ McKee in round 4, in round 5, if it does make it that long. Because again, Darrion Caldwell, he hasn't always won against, the Horiguchis beat him, for example. But we know he can go those hard 5 rounds. And again, at 135, the weight cut is really hard on Darrion Caldwell, and I do think that has a lot to play with his cardio at that weight class. Whereas at 145, I don't think Darrion Caldwell depletes himself nearly, well, of course, he depletes himself about 10 pounds less than he does before, but I think Darrion Caldwell has everything lined up for him to win this fight. I would like to see AJ McKee win. There's not a fight I would like to see more, regardless of organization, than AJ McKee versus Patricio Pitbull. Because it feels like we've been teased that fight for years now. You have the one guy in Bellator who can make a real claim of being one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And I don't just mean top 5. I don't just mean top 3. If you want to make a strong argument that Patricio Pitbull is the best fighter in Bellator, I can't disagree with you at all. AJ McKee might be that, he's been brought up since the beginning. He's never had a loss. No one's been able to figure it out. Could you imagine if he is able to get to the top of the mountain and beat not only, the best fighter in Bellator, but just one of the best fighters in the world? It would be a very great story. But Darrion Caldwell can play that lead blanket game, and I think that's the game you have to play to beat a guy like AJ McKee.
That's the thing. This is such a hard fight to call. Those odds are stupid. They really are. So maybe if you're hot and heavy on Darrion Caldwell, so be it. Anthony's saying Pitbull pick Caldwell, probably because he doesn't want to fight McKee. Maybe that's why he said it. Patricio said some weird things in the past. Watch those two boys on Twitter, Patricio and Patricky. They say some wild stuff. But I could see that. It was just like, he did say, he wanted Carvalho because it was an easy fight. And it was easiest fight. It really was.
The next one's going to be hard for him, though. It's
going to be hard. Out of either of these two guys. So let's go through some of these comments, Matt. Ben saying Caldwell all day. Let's go. Let's see what else we got.
I want AJ McKee to win.
Martin's got AJ. Caldwell will win on experience. What else have we got? Caldwell's a national champion wrestler. Yep. Caldwell did lose to Horiguchi 2 times. I remember when it was like, Darrion Caldwell, we're sending him over to Ryzen. Let's see what happens. And then he loses. And then Horiguchi comes over and takes the belt too. So, yikes. And then Horiguchi had to give up the belt. Now he's going to fight Kai Asakura again over with Ryzen. So we get a stunning conclusion to their, what would you call it?
Trilogy, I guess.
Second fight?
Second fight, yeah. It's the revenge tour for Horiguchi.
For Darrion Caldwell, out of his 2 last wins, you look at them, really big win in his second to last one, the Corrales to get back on, and then the submission win over Adam Borch. Adam Borch is a really good wrestler. Adam Borch is a really good striker.
I wouldn't say Adam Borch is a really good wrestler at all. Okay, Darrion Caldwell in his last fight did fight a guy in Adam Borch who can do a lot that AJ McKee does. Because AJ McKee, his striking, phenomenal. His jiu-jitsu, phenomenal. But again, the wrestling's kind of that midway point that he's not the best at. Adam Borch, the same thing. He's good on the mat. He's good on the feet. But again, the wrestling's that thing that he's it's the transition that he is kind of missing. Another thing, too, and Darrion Caldwell said this to me, I had asked him in his last fight, taking the O from an undefeated fighter, he has the same opportunity in this fight. Does it give him any more motivation? He wants to take AJ McKee's O as much as he wants the belt. Like, this is how much this fight means to him. He does want to prove that, yes, at 32, he can still compete with the young guns and the up-and-comers of the division. And Darrion Caldwell just seems very fired up to kind of get this rivalry, if you will, because both guys, half the time they're friends, and then the other half the time you hear them getting into, disputes and stuff and backstage. So I feel like there is a lot of mutual respect. It is just,
trying to sell a fight, too.
Exactly. And this fight, there's a lot of pressure on both guys with it being the tournament. This is one of the better fights Bellator can put together, at least name-wise. And yeah, what a way to end the semifinals or not the semifinals. What a way to figure out who's in our finals, I should say. Because again, the winner of this does fight the winner of Emmanuel Sanchez, Patricio Pitbull, and again, all 4 of these fighters could be champs. That's the wild thing. Like, I love the Bellator tournaments. I really appreciate what they're doing. And yeah, hopefully we just get a great fight on Thursday.
So Matt, your final pick on this one?
Okay, it's either going to be Darrion Caldwell by a really boring decision or AJ McKee by finish. I know that's, it's not the best prediction I could give. I'm going to say Darrion Caldwell's probably going to do that wet blanket smothering style. I wouldn't be surprised if AJ McKee, as the fight progresses, Darrion Caldwell has been known to slow. If AJ McKee does have the better cardio and can really... He might give up takedowns early, but at least make Darrion Caldwell work and work and work. Near the end of the fight, he might be able to pull away with his striking. I doubt it, though. I do think Darrion Caldwell will probably be able to get a unanimous decision victory. Although, again, for just my personal taste, I would love to see AJ McKee get the win and fight Patricio.
I think Caldwell at 45, having the frame that he has, like at 135, you're just depleting yourself. And you could see that in the fights against Kyoji Horiguchi. So that's just kind of the way that that's going there. I have Darrion Caldwell on this one as well. Just ever so slightly. I think that those odds are ridiculous. I mean, again, AJ McKee to this point is a huge favorite, more than a 3-1 favorite. So again, like I said, I am going with Caldwell as well. Appreciate Prince Vegeta's son. Who else? Phoenix Graves and
all of you.
Anthony for saying toss those likes up there, because it helps us with the channel in general, but it also helps us with some of this Bellator content, because it's not something that we normally do. You talk about the algorithm. It's mostly going to trend with the UFC stuff. We kind of want to break the mold, get back to what we were doing before. This used to be an audio-only podcast, and it's grown into this crazy thing that it is now, to the point where Matt's got a full-time job with it. So we really do appreciate everybody for tuning in. When you're fortunate or able to hit up the super chat as well, there were a number of people that did, so we do appreciate you. I'll shout you out one more time. Craig was in the super chat, and it wasn't just me. We had Sam Sterner, Brendan Ridley. We also had, who were you? Booch for Snooch. You're here every week, so we really appreciate you guys. And if you want to see more Bellator content, be sure to reach out at Fight Night Picks on Twitter and Instagram. We had the total votes for this one, so I just want to go through those really quick, Matt, before we head out, and then we at least get to have a chance to see what the people were thinking. So if we head into our first fight, 74% had the man, Sullivan Cauley. 73% going with Baby Slice to get the win over Kahim Murray. 72% going with J.J. Wilson over Sergio DeBari. We had 71% going with Jalil Willis over Mark Lemminger. In the next one, we had Jeremy Kennedy taking on Matt Bessette. 73% going with Jeremy Kennedy. 67% of voters going with Stots over Keith Lee. 76% of voters going with Davis over Bobby Lee. There was 53% going with Smooth Benson Henderson. 47% with Jason Jackson. And then in our main event of the evening, you have Darrion Caldwell taking on AJ McKee. And I continue to skip over it on my phone. 67% going McKee. 33% going with Darrion Caldwell. So, hey, it's a lot of fun. Again, we're going to be doing more and more with the Bellator stuff. Maybe you're going to be seeing some Bellator interviews. You're going to be seeing more of the media day. And there's a good question up there too, Matt, if we can just touch on it really quick. Ryan saying, how much attention do you put into the website? Ever think of moving to Shopify to sell the gear? No, because I own the gear. The gear is in inventory at my house. So you buy it. It's on my website. I'm already paying for the hosting. I hope that's a good enough answer. I'm just teasing you there a little bit. But it is a good question. And I really appreciate everybody for tuning in, Matt. We're going to have the individual videos that drop tonight. Right now, in 17 minutes, I'm going to tape early stoppage. So make sure that you check out the podcast with Fight Night Picks. Like I said, diversifying. Check it out. Check out the website as well for more great content. The podcasts are on iTunes and Spotify. I think that's all the housekeeping I had. I'm assuming you're already subscribed and you tossed us a like if you made us this far. So we really appreciate you. Matt, we're having a lot of fun with Fight Night Picks, so make sure you check in individual videos and then question mark kicks for UFC 255 on Saturday. Matt, as we always say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for Fight Night Picks with your host, Craig and Matt Allen.